This is Tibet Unfiltered, real stories, real Tibet. Unfiltered conversations, eyewitness accounts, and deep dive investigations that challenge the Chinese Communist Party's narrative on Tibet. I'm your host, Geraldine Nordfeldt. I'm a former journalist and board member of the Australia-Tibet Council, with production by Sonam Gyaltsen. As the Dalai Lama said, in our struggle for freedom, truth is the only weapon we possess. We have a special VIP guest joining us for this episode, recorded here in the Blue Mountains on Darug and Gundungurra country. And we pay our respects to the traditional owners of wherever you're listening or watching this episode. Geshe Lhakdor is currently touring Australia, giving a series of talks on the wisdom of compassion, covering inner calm in the age of uncertainty. A very timely visit indeed, given everything that's going on in the world. Geshe is a title that's given only to the most qualified and highly trained monks. Geshe Lhakdor is the former translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and is currently the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, India, a teacher of Buddhist philosophy and a distinguished scholar. His credentials, qualifications and resume are extraordinary, so Google him for the rest of it. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you, Geshe La, to Tibet Unfiltered.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you for being here. So welcome back to Australia. When was the last time that you were here?
I don't remember, but only I remember is this is probably the fourth time to Australia. The first two visits I came with His Holiness. Then this, the one before this and this one, a kind of traveling by myself.
Well, welcome back. It's great to have you here. Geshe La, you co-translated and edited the global bestseller, The Joy of Living and Dying in Peace. We found a copy on the bookshelf just over here with His Holiness. The book's thesis is that joy is not a bypass of suffering, but a result of understanding it. To many Western ears, even putting the words joy and death in the same sentence feels like a massive contradiction. What does this mean?
Despite the more kind of negative side of suffering, challenges, there is a possibility to come out of those experiences. So challenges and sufferings properly understood, they may not necessarily the roadblock to joy and happiness. They are in fact a step, to joy and happiness. Because it's those experience of suffering and challenges that helps us realize the reality of your self and also the reality of where things are. And then you get new insight. So gradually with this wisdom that sees the reality as it is, without your mental fabrication, then whatever ups and downs you encounter in life, you will not be jolted much. So there will be, depends upon the stage of your level of spiritual achievement. But if you are somebody who has really achieved higher spiritual elevation, then nothing hardly can jolt you. Because you think about so many good things that you have. You are a human being, not a dog, not a cow. As a human being, you have so many facilities, especially in today's world. You have almost everything. Good hospital, good doctor, good medicine, good food, vitamins, whatever. So many things to facilitate it. So provided if you are able to cultivate this proper mental perspective, then there is really not much reason to feel, sad and depressed. Because there are many, many more positive things to lighten your heart and raise your spirit.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Definitely. Geshe La, this isn't my first time meeting you. You gave me and our group from the Australia-Tibet Council's annual Little Tibet Tour group a personal tour through the Tibetan Library and Archives, and it was honestly a highlight of the trip. You were a kind and funny and very patient guide with our group and all our questions. You are also the custodian of a precious repository of Tibetan identity.
Yes.
which is being erased
Yes.
in your homeland.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the Tibetan Library and Archives? And these are not kept in Tibet, but in Dharamsala. How did they come to be in India? And can you explain why it's so important?
Yes, one of my, Australian supporter mentioned yesterday. She's responsible for inviting me. She used to be custodian and caretaker of library right from a young age. Then in 2024, when she visited library, she had this background of being a librarian and now saw this Tibetan library in exile. And she saw it in a different perspective. It's not just a library where you provide opportunity for people to read books and things like that. But this Library of Tibetan Rocks and Archives is a center where you are really struggling to preserve your dying culture, dying language. And because of this unfortunate situation that is happening in Tibet, it becomes very crucial. It's almost like death and life question. So she said this, and I was really struck. Yes, this is the right thing that you are saying. And the reason that His Holiness opened this institute is when Tibetans left their country and came into exile, many of these unfortunate or helpless parents, they managed to bring just their children and maybe few reliquaries like artifacts like holy statues or scriptures, just few things. Because they were running away from their country, risking their life. So once they are safely in India, the first thing that occurred to their mind is, let us offer our children to His Holiness so that He will be able to look after them. And also the statue and scriptures, not necessarily everybody, many of them offered it to His Holiness. Then His Holiness said, we should open a separate place where all these things can be seen by people, respected by people, and more importantly, studied by the Tibetans and others. So this is how it, came into existence. So therefore, from that point of view, it's very precious. Number one, we are trying to preserve a dying culture. Number two, it is blessed and opened, inaugurated by His Holiness Dalai Lama himself. And it's a center which was really blessed and visited by many, many living masters, like His Holiness's two tutors who are no more, many, they blessed and consecrated those places. So therefore, it's very, very special for us and very unique.
Many people associate libraries with quiet, passive places, but the existence of your Tibetan Library and Archives is actually a powerful force of resistance through preservation.
Exactly. And in fact, this is what I repeatedly tell people, that not only in the case of the Tibetan situation, but if you look at the global perspective, there is a kind of struggle going on between the soft power and the hard power. And hard power, as always, the military might, the military power, for a short while looks, dominating. So at this time, it's very, very important for us to highlight the importance of soft power, the power of culture, not just Tibetans, but everywhere. Because this soft power is true to our human reality, to our basic humanness. And hard power is against human nature. It's more or less barbarism. Even animals don't use this kind of sophisticated machines to destroy each other. At least they can jump upon each other and try to kill each other. Not more than that. Now human beings, because of not being able to recognize the importance of these resources within oneself, including the wisdom, we let our intelligence get corrupted and go on the wrong side of mass producing machines and other technical products to eliminate people from the globe. This is like global suicide. So therefore, it's very, very important to tell people, even though some of these, dictators and military powers looks like overwhelming, but if you look carefully, and I had to explain this to many people because they say, oh, now world is full of conflict, it's really hopeless, it's dangerous. I said, it's not true. For example, in Australia, take one city like Sydney. In one day, how many people are killed? Not much, countable. And how many people are nurtured under love and compassion? Parents taking care of their children, millions. doctors and nurses treating sick people in the hospital, millions. So that's more overwhelming. But the other side of violence, other things, they get more news because this is not true to the human nature, and people say, oh, so in order to make anything news, they show that those kind of striking things, and we get jolted. And sometimes, unfortunately, we start believing now we are hopeless. That is not true. But although this is the case, but because of the power of destruction of nuclear bombs and so forth, we need to really come together and raise our voice and say no to war, killing. It's very, very important.
You're right about only bad news getting attention. When I used to be a journalist, the saying in the newsroom was, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes, exactly.
You know, a bad day for someone else is a good day in a newsroom, and those are the stories that we give our attention to.
Exactly.
But, you know, thinking about all of the love and compassion and the quiet work that is done every day absolutely outweighs.
Yeah, true.
And it's a lovely way of looking at it.
True.
Geshe La, do you have any favourite texts or relics in the library? If you had to pick just one special, significant item that would be connected to Tibetan identity, what would it be and why?
Yeah, this is a typical Western question.
Pick one favourite thing for us, please.
Which was the best food you ate in your life? So normally the Tibetans don't have that kind of so. But having said that, you know, if you're talking about one which is the oldest text, then we have a text that belongs to the 12th century. So because of its antiquity, and of course the text itself is on wisdom perfection. Although we have many other texts, but because of the topic and because of its, age, we see that as something very, very precious. But otherwise, the subject matter of most of the text is more or less quite similar.
They're all precious.
Yeah, they're all precious. Yeah, because this is important to be stated, because many places, especially in a library and a museum, they see a particular text as very, very old, as very precious. That's a kind of norm that is prevailing everywhere. But my personal attitude is not that. Even if it is very, very old, the question is it useful today? If it is not useful, then it's not that precious. Simply because it's old, not necessarily precious.
I'm curious what you meant by that. Says Western question. Is that a trait that we have in wanting to rank things, or have you?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it is irrelevant question, but it's an interesting way of asking question. But Tibetans, I don't know, have that kind of sensitivity. Probably, I don't know. This question has been asked to me many times, and I never had a proper answer. Then, of late, you're right. Now you're winning. Of late, I had that experience. Quite recently, during the COVID time, when the COVID influence was a little bit less, then I was then the chairman of the Tibetan Education Commission. The education department asked me to just go near Dharamsala, the TCV schools. Mm-hmm. So I went to the upper TCV. Then I spent one whole day in the day school, where there is class only up to 5th class, day school. So I went there, spent the whole day visiting each and every class, observing the reaction of the children and the teachers and the relation between them. I was so moved. I was so happy. That was my happiest day. Because the children were like, they can do anything, completely free, and the teachers are very understanding, nobody is scolding them, like, so much development. And then these children, they are, physically very healthy, very cute, and mentally very alert. They even come to me, Geshe La, they all come and hug me, although I'm visiting them for the first time. Openness. Oh, that was, I still, cherish that photo.
The TCV.
The day school, especially the day school.
The Tibetan the TCV when we went to visit as well. It was absolutely one of the highlights as well. The energy there, and I loved on the wall the mural that said "Others before self," and the way it was, absolutely a highlight. So if anyone listening or watching is thinking about booking a little Tibet tour with the Australia Tibet Council, absolutely do it. You'll get to meet extraordinary people like Geshe Lhakdor and visit the children's school. When we bring groups to Dharamsala, what is the one thing that you hope that people take home in their hearts after meeting you and members of the community in exile?
Well, I think they should, they know this. I don't have to remind, but it's important that His Holiness is now 90 years old. So he cannot be as active as he used to be. And the Tibetan situation is still not only unresolved situation, but things in a way getting worse. Because there was a time, at the time of the rule of Mao Zedong, 1966 to 76, a lot of destruction of monasteries, temples happened, which is of course very, very bad. But now, instead of physical destruction, the Chinese government is trying to destroy the very identity of the Tibetan people by starting all these boarding schools, where the Tibetan children are put in the boarding school and have hardly any access to their parents. Now, just 2-3 days back, they made this new rule where in the schools and colleges, the minority languages are not allowed to teach.
At all?
At all. Because they say, it's important to teach Mandarin because that brings unity.
One language, one China.
One language, one China, which actually is not necessarily unity, but this is how they are trying to control and give credit to the Han Chinese, which is the majority of the population. So this is not only against their own constitution, and also against the constitution of UN, where the language of minority is encouraged. So this is like really almost like final blow for preservation of Tibetan culture and language. So therefore, I think it is really important for the Tibetans in free country, in exile. We need to work doubly hard, triply hard. And luckily, outside Tibet, Tibetan culture and civilization is not barbaric, as the Chinese government say. You an Australian, individual knows this very well. There's so much interest because it is this Tibetan language through which this concept of compassion, concept of non-violence, more importantly, concept of interdependence are taught so, perfectly. And so important in today's life. So therefore, like for example, in the library, we have 3 Tibetan language classes every day and 3 Buddhist classes every day, plus many other activities. And these are attended by international students. So right now we have around students from 30 countries, and the number of students may be around 200 from different countries. So they show interest in the Tibetan language, so that through this language, they don't have to depend on a translator and read the book directly from the Tibetan scriptures. So there is so much interest. So that is the plus point. But this is not time for us to stay back and hoping that everything will be all right. Then for example, the kids here in Australia, the parents are trying their best to teach something, but it's because of a different environment where you spend 5 days in a school in France or in America or Australia, where majority are speaking French or English, things like that. So under this, I met the Tibetan group yesterday, and I told them that the big responsibility lies with the parents. They should really always speak Tibetan, at least in the home. So that's important. So therefore, now it is up to the Tibetans how much they're able to really do this.
We have a whole episode of our podcast with a family who are doing just that, raising their children in Canberra, speaking Tibetan, and it is an act of cultural resistance. It becomes a political act just to speak a language that is being
actually for me, the fight or conflict with the China, in this fight with the conflict with China, it's not like just raising slogans on 10 March and then nothing. It should be a constant fight to survive. It's an existential question, and especially preserving language and so forth, that should be there.
Absolutely crucial. Well, you
We
mentioned
can-
soft power.
Yeah.
And do you think language comes under a soft power? Because by preserving that and by preserving the religion and keeping it alive outside.
Of course. And then Tibetans have to have this understanding, preserving Tibetan language is not only for the Tibetans. Through the medium of language, all this amazing text that is there, including the 108 volumes of the teaching of the Buddha, can be shared to the rest of the international community, not necessarily to make them Buddhist, that's not our aim, but to make this wisdom available to everybody. And UN also has recognized Tibetan culture as a world cultural heritage. So it's not only the Tibetans, but others have also similar kind of responsibility to help us. So therefore I'm so glad that this group of Australians are formed to help the activities of the library.
There's certainly a lot of support for you
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
Now, Geshe La, you worked as a translator to His Holiness for 16 years as an interpreter and translator. I know you don't like questions about favourite moments or highlights, but do you have any special memories of your time travelling with His Holiness?
Yes.
Anything that sticks out?
First memory was the first day when I started translating for His Holiness. So my first job was to accompany His Holiness to Zanskar, a very remote place in Ladakh, where His Holiness gave the Kala Chakra. So before the actual Kala Chakra, there is a short ceremony, which is called preparation of the students. So there are only selected students will be on the stage, and I, as the translator, has to be there. His Holiness will give very short teaching. So I have to translate. This is my first translation. So when His Holiness said, then I suppose I must have said something. I have no idea what His Holiness said. I have no idea what I translated. I was really kind of transfixed, So that I remember, I can never forget. Yes. And then, of course, there are many other occasions. For example, when he was giving a teaching in, I think, Sera Monastery, I think. He was explaining this very, very difficult philosophical text called Tangele Shinjingbo, the Elegant Sayings by Tsongkhapa. Very tough philosophical text. So I'm supposed to translate this, very difficult. So His Holiness must have wondered how this stupid guy is faring, So at one time he said, "How are you translating?" See? Then I told His Holiness, it's really impossible to translate everything that's in the text and everything that you say. So what I do is just at least 1 or 2 days ahead, I read the text and highlight the important points. So I go through these important points and not trying to translate all the citations. Many citations may be more or less same. And then, of course, try to incorporate His Holiness teaching, which is the most important thing, including some of the jokes that he says. His Holiness said, "Yes, good, you are on the right track." So the point is, you really need to prepare. You need to read the text. Not only read the text, you need to be, if you are a translator of His Holiness, you need to be alert what His Holiness is doing, even otherwise. What kind of person he is visiting, meeting, or which countries did he visit, what did he say to the scientists, all this you have to have a little bit idea. So His Holiness may, start talking about all these experiences while he is giving a teaching, and if you're not cognizant of that, you're not even able to translate the name of the person he met.
Do you ever feel like anything gets lost in translation with His Holiness? Not during your time. I'm not suggesting that, but do you feel that sometimes perhaps
all the translator, we can't expect that somebody, and in fact in the world of translation it is said that if you're doing written translation, then hopefully you can translate 70-80% correct. But if you're doing on the spot, verbal translation, especially simultaneous translation, people normally don't expect more than 70% translation. But the important thing is if you're able to convey the essence and not lose the thread, then that will, give the people on the hook, and you will be successful.
Which languages were you translating into and from?
Normally it's from Tibetan. His Holiness teaching is in Tibetan, then into English.
Into English.
And once in a while, sometimes in Hindi.
So to study and be across all of those texts, that would have been a very difficult job.
Very difficult job, but very enriching job, because you need to prepare, you need to read all those things.
Geshe, I'd like to ask you now about reincarnation. In Tibetan Buddhism, high-ranking spiritual leaders, such as His Holiness, have some control over their reincarnation. But the Chinese Communist Party, an atheist government, have said that they will decide who will be the next Dalai Lama. From a scriptural and philosophical standpoint, what is the actual purpose of a tulku returning? That's a reincarnated teacher. And why is it vital that this process remains within the Tibetan community?
See, in the spiritual realm, there are two types of lives, existences. One is ordinary life, where your rebirth or your birth is not out of your choice, but you are projected into this particular kind of life through your past lives, accumulation of negative emotions and contaminated karma or actions. So you have not much choice. Okay, so depending upon whether you have done good karma or bad karma, there may be some good life, some bad life, but you have not much choice. Then through spiritual practice, if you lessen the impact of these negative emotions, and empower the positive emotions, compassion, wisdom, and so forth, and especially proper understanding of your mind and have control over your mind, then you reach certain level where you can really choose your life, where to take birth, how to take birth, all these things is possible. So that is dependent on the state of purification of the mind. So that is the basis on which reincarnation is different from ordinary rebirth. Reincarnation is kind of your choice. Rebirth is you don't have the choice. So there's the thing. So that's very important, because we want such enlightened beings to come back again and again. That's very important. So we are talking about properly chosen reincarnation, like the reincarnation of His Holiness. And what past and future life will be dependent upon your practice. That is also very clear. For example, it's very simple. For example, what kind of day you will have tomorrow, to a large extent dependent upon how you prepare, how you think today. Even your evening is very much dependent upon your mood in the morning. So it's something like that, yeah. So it's actually quite straightforward. Now, the stupid thing is, atheist Chinese government, who has been up to now trying to destroy Buddhism and calls His Holiness as counter-revolutionary. Why the hell they are interested in his reincarnation? Only for political purposes. I mean, that's really, this needs to be highlighted into the international arena. Somebody who has been trying to destroy Buddhism suddenly jumps into an area which is even more complex, like reincarnation, and then say, will reincarnate. I mean, if they are so interested in recognizing reincarnation, then they should recognize anybody as reincarnation. Why they have to follow the Tibetan system of reincarnation, which they don't believe. Now, in order to justify that, they say, the recognition should be done through using the so-called golden urn. If honestly done, there's no problem with that. But the problem is they want to misuse that. And through that, they want to say, okay, Tibet has been under China and the reincarnation system recognition is done through the golden urn.
So it's incredibly important that this decision process is left to the Tibetan community.
Of course. But anyway, they will use their way, like they already did with the Panchen Lama. So again, they will do it, but it will not work because they are on the wrong side. Do you think that the whole dictatorial system will it work? For some time, just using sheer power, but it is against human nature. So very soon they will collapse. It's only a matter of time. That's my fundamental belief. Be it in, China or elsewhere. It's against human nature. So it's only a question of time.
It's patience. What is the Gaiden Phodrang Trust, and would you be involved in the identification process of the next Dalai Lama, or is that a top secret we can't discuss situation?
No. Gaiden Phodrang Trust is a trust looking for many of the activities related to His Holiness, office or His Holiness himself. And now, because this question of reincarnation came into being, again, this trust plays a very important role. And I am also one of the trustees.
How many are there?
There are many. Maybe, I don't remember, maybe more than 12, maybe 13, 14, maybe. They recruited a few more senior, young Rinpoches, like Ling Rinpoche, Kundeling Rinpoche, Ling Rinpoche, many high lamas, but young lamas. Yeah.
To be involved in the process.
Yeah.
That'll be fascinating to see.
Yeah.
This is a sensitive question. Geshe La, you left Tibet as a very young boy in 1962. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw and remember from that time? And when you hear reports, as you mentioned before, of monasteries being monitored and language being restricted in Tibet today, how does the cultural repression that's happening now compare to the physical invasion that you witnessed as a child?
When I was, I don't know the exact, my exact age or exact year, I don't remember, something like what you mentioned. So I may be around 6, 7 years old, I don't know. But that time, a few things that I remember is one, around in the, dusk time, maybe 7, 8, something, it's already dark. Of course, we don't have proper light. Then a nun, I think nun, carrying a heavy load, and she was whispering something to our family members. It really looked very tense. So obviously she was talking about the Chinese, coming and things like that. So there was one that I remember. Then I remember one time hiding in a cave, because it is said when the Chinese army come, they will take all the men away and leave the women and the children. So because of this fear, all our men had already left the families and ran into the mountain and hiding there. So then I remember this very clearly. 5 Chinese horsemen came, riding on horse, came to the place where we were hiding, the women and few small kids. And interestingly, my father was there. He did not run away into the forest. He was with us. So then they took my father and some of the horses we have. Then quite late in the night, all the men who were hiding in the mountain, they also came down. My father also came with some poorer quality Chinese horses. And so those things I remember. Then at another point, we all went up into the mountain and hiding there. And then we got a message from the Chinese army saying that we know some of you are hiding there on the mountain top. You should come immediately, otherwise we'll, shoot you or something like that. So that very night we left forever, left Tibet. The physical destruction that is brought about during the Cultural Revolution was untoldable suffering, of course. How many people are killed, how many people committed suicide, how many monasteries are bombarded, destroyed. All these things are history, it's in the book. But now what they are doing is more dangerous, because they are trying to wipe out the very identity of the Tibetan people. And it's a communist kind of motto. They say if you want to destroy a country, destroy its language. So that's what they are doing. Now most of the young kids, they can't, talk with their grandparents. They can talk with their parents a little bit, because their parents speak broken Chinese or little bit Tibetan. And with the grandparents don't know Chinese, so these kids can't speak with them. It's very, very dangerous. And then, of course, the overwhelming Chinese population, and difficult to get proper education, difficult to get job. Tibetans are compelled to mix with the majority of the Chinese. And, just as it has happened in Xinjiang, demographic invasion. Tibet is already, Chinese are more populated than Tibetans in Tibet. Mm. So it will become more and more. So one day everything will be gone. So therefore the hope lies with the Tibetans in exile in free country. But having said that, Tibetans in Tibet also, they are very resolute. They are trying their best to do whatever they can do. Yeah.
Mm. Despite all of this, we hear that Buddhism is still thriving in the hearts of Tibetans who are inside Tibet, even if it is still illegal to display a photograph of His Holiness. How can Tibetan Buddhists maintain their inner religious freedom when their outer freedoms are being denied?
The Buddha has always taught that at the end of the day, all kind of solutions for any kind of problem has to come from within. That means through education. And if that is there, if you have this inner, spiritual education of Buddhism, you will be able to deal with many problems. So it is not so useful to be violent and physically engage in conflict with the ruling Chinese army, because we are going to lose 100%. They will imprison us, kill us or torture us. So therefore, they need to now have a proper insight so that they know how to fight without any physical manifestation. Now, for example, according to the past, the sufferings of the Tibetan people in prison, there are so many interesting stories. One of the senior monk from Namgyal monastery, he remained in Chinese prison for 17 years. And after he escaped to Dharamsala, and one day, because His Holiness knew him when he was in Tibet, so one day His Holiness invited him, and then His Holiness asked him, "You have been in the prison for so many years, and on some of these days you must have encountered some great risk, great threat." He said, "Yes." And His Holiness thought that must be threat for his life. Was that threat for your life? He said, "No. It is the risk of losing compassion for the Chinese."
So powerful. So
powerful, because if you have this really, really deep, profound inner realization, you're not so concerned about your personal well-being. You have a bigger picture. And then not only him, but many the Tibetan prisoners here in Australia, you have so many ex-political prisoners,
We do.
The resilience they have, you can't imagine people staying for so many years in Chinese prison, then coming out resilient, That is the result of Tibetan, Buddhist philosophy, right? And then also, when I was in Brisbane, a group of Vietnamese invited me for some of them I know earlier. So they invited me for a dinner. I went there. There was one psychologist who was retired, but he said, Tibetans must be having some, trauma and other problems. If there is anything I can do, I'll help. And I thought, no, Tibetans, there's no Tibetan having trauma. I mean, amazing, We are talking about Tibetans who have been in prison for so many years, but hardly any trauma. Unbelievable, you see. Unbelievable. This is because if you have this inner resilience, inner resources to pull out, whether you're in prison or any difficult situation, if you have this inner resources to pull out, you will be fine.
Well, that was my question next, about all the time that you spent with His Holiness, and despite everything that he has been through as the leader of the Tibetans, to maintain his sense of profound joy despite the weight that he carries.
Exactly.
How, I guess, for listeners who also feel overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world.
Yes.
Do you have any advice about being able to challenge that?
Not my advice, but there is a beautiful teaching by Shantideva, who said, if it is something you can change, don't worry, because you can change it. If it is something you can't change it, no use worrying, because by worrying you can't change it. It's very simple. So what the Buddha and other teachers are saying is, be realistic. Don't necessarily, waste your time thinking about the past difficulties and the likelihood of future problems. Many people waste their life, and then they feel depressed and lonely and things like that. He always says this thing. When I meet the Tibetans coming from Tibet, they show all their pent-up energy and sadness, everybody crying. It's overwhelming. And His Holiness to meet these people on and on, so many years. But he's always cheerful, laughing, encouraging. And at the end of the day, His Holiness says, I do my best. Then after that, I go to sleep very peacefully. That's the way. That bothers the enemy. And they have now started thinking, how come that we have made so much suffering to the Tibetans, but His Holiness is flourishing, That's the tactic. So therefore, one of the great teacher, Nagarjuna, he says, if you want to overpower the enemy, you should embrace your knowledge, education, capacity, power. And what is the use of hatching ill will to the enemy? That will not harm the enemy, it will only harm you. Because if you develop this unpleasant negative emotions, you are the first victim, not the enemy.
I guess that Michelle Obama has that expression, when they go low, we go high.
Exactly.
And not letting these things get to you. But I was stuck in traffic on the way here. I was a little bit late and I was getting so cranky because, but then what can you do about it? You're stuck.
Not the solution, yeah. And when you feel, frustrated, then the time also goes very slow. No use.
Geshe, like, you give talks all around the world when you travel and you speak to people.
Yes.
Again, asking you that question, what is the most common question that you get asked? What is the meaning of life? Or what do people ask you most frequently when you give your talks?
I don't remember what people are asking me, but I remember what I teach. So, number one, I must confess, I'm not a deeply learned kind of scholar or anything like that. But based on the little bit of Buddhist studies and other exposures that I have, I try to collect the wisdoms coming from everywhere. Not just Buddhism, but from science, from philosophy, whatever. And then those bits of wisdom, which really carries the heart of human experience, the meaning of life, things like that. When I find such a thing, this is the way. You can convey a big idea with a simple, short 2-3 sentences. Then I explain that. So my target is not to show my scholarship, how clever I am, how learned I am, which I am not. Number one.
You're being modest.
Number two, I also don't try to do that. And therefore, what I try to do is, may the person who is interviewing me or talking to me get some insight, get some benefit, so that his or her life will be much better. And with this motivation, things that I share, which came from Buddha, which came from His Holiness and other teachers, I share that. I'm so happy to say that many people get benefited. So the reason is, as His Holiness says, much of the suffering we encounter are unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary suffering because of two reasons. One, unnecessary suffering because you are suffering because you don't have the insight, education. You are ignorant, that's why you are suffering. You don't know how to deal with changing situations. Number two, much of the suffering are because of that ignorance, man-made sufferings. It's not just natural disaster. Man-made sufferings are overwhelming everywhere. And this is because of, negative self, egoism and the short-sightedness, and then this division, I, me and mine, our country is the best, our people are the best, and then within our country, I am the best. So this is clearly, due to lack of understanding, lack of knowledge. So when you share that, on the contrary to this self-grasping, if you develop some kind of mind cherishing the well-being of others, it not only helps others, you will be the maximum beneficiary. You're not doing a self-sacrifice. So when you tell these things to people, and then also based on scientific findings, the more you talk about yourself, the more you get this narrow-mindedness of I, me and mine, the more you get suffocated. And many of the modern diseases, including heart attack, are because of this tunnel vision, narrow-mindedness. If you open up, you may have some problems. Acknowledge that there's realistic, but how many hundreds of millions of people are there who are much, much less fortunate than yourself? Just for one meal, they have to struggle. So when you think like that, then, at least in my case, I'm so lucky, Not only I am flourishing, but I can do this thing, share this thing to others.
Geshe, that were all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you don't think we've covered, or that you'd like people to know?
The only thing that I want to say is, based on my, 4 travels to Australia, and also some of the Australians who have been coming to Dharamsala and helping us edit the books, things like that. Now you have an Australian group inviting me to do some fundraising to help the Tibetan library to preserve Tibetan culture or things like that. So that made me feel very close to the Australians, right? So therefore, I want to express my gratitude and thankfulness to all the Australians. And at the same time, I am confident that sharing of Tibetan culture, the universal messages will also help many Australians. So it's not just the Tibetans benefiting.
Absolutely. We are so fortunate to
Yes,
have you visiting
yes,
us.
very important, very important.
Geshe La, on our podcast, Tibet Unfiltered, we ask our guests our final 3 questions. What are the top 3 things that you would like people to know about Tibet or Tibetans?
Those of you who really want to help Tibetans, you should remember that those who are helping Tibetans are not necessarily pro-Tibet and anti-Chinese. You are pro-justice. So you should yourself use your brain and see whether what Tibetans are saying is right or not. Whether the Chinese have a right to invade Tibet or not. Study the history. And then it is a kind of human responsibility to extend your cooperation and support wherever other human beings are suffering. The struggle that Tibetans are making is not just to get the piece of land that is lost. That of course we have every right to do that. But much more important than that is preserving this very special, unique Tibetan culture. As I mentioned, a world cultural heritage and has so much capacity to benefit people all over the world. So that preservation of culture is, I think, very, very important. 2, now 3rd, what should I say? And then I have told the Tibetans in Australia also, you should try to, in terms of education, in terms of job, in every field, you should try to do the best. Not just stick to one small, easy job. It's understandable. It's not easy to get the best thing right in the beginning. You have to do many of those things, but gradually you need to become better so that you can contribute to the Tibetan cause, you can contribute to the host country, right? That's very, very important. And then I told them, you should also learn the many good things that is offered by the Australian government and the people. There are so many good things you can learn. Right. While it is important to keep the Tibetan culture alive, it is also important to recognize many lapses that is there in the Tibetan way of life before, you see. Because earlier, because we live in a very remote place, not much contact with other people, and we don't have the medical facilities, things like that, which are now available, not only available, but everything is recognized organized in such a perfect way. So we have many things to learn. Yeah. So sometimes we end up just talking, not doing. But in the Western countries, you are doing, not maybe less talking, but you are doing many good things.
Geshe La, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on Tibet Unfiltered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tibet Unfiltered is a podcast by the Australia-Tibet Council, a not-for-profit human rights organisation. We amplify the voices of Tibetans, campaign for their freedom and human rights, and ensure the international community hears their stories against Chinese Communist Party propaganda. I'm your host, Geraldine Nordfeld. Production by Sonam Gyeltsen. Join us again soon for another episode of Tibet Unfiltered.